All right, so thank you for joining us on this particular session on elementary infusion. You all are in for a big time treat from one of our real incredible educators right here in Palm Beach County. Um, this one is about elementary infusion of African and African American content. This is one of those most I would say, deficient areas when it comes to teaching our history and learning our history. And with it being most deficient, areas of instruction, it's kind of a scary concept because this is also the most critical area. When we're talking about as far as childhood development and the development of our minds and so forth, is that we these earlier stages are extremely critical, as we all know. And unfortunately, we have not been given a chance and Black children have not been given a chance to engage in curriculum and instruction or engage in those materials when they get an opportunity to learn about their true self and develop a knowledge of self, starting at a young age. But we have some educators that are going above and beyond to make sure that our children are given this educational experience where they can see themselves and they can develop a knowledge of self. And it's extremely critical. Some of the resistance and some of the pushback that my team receives when we go out to support some of our elementary schools here in Palm Beach County is that they feel that, first of all, we're under the perception of the common narrative that all history of African and African American people is always shrouded and always centered with oppression, slavery, and all of those so-called sensitive topics, right? But without understanding that we have a richly textured history that has so many levels and so much dynamics that there's a whole lot to teach about. But even when it comes to teaching about slavery and teaching about some of those hard subjects and some of those hard histories, that we still should have those conversations, even with our young people and our young group people who are in elementary. I was speaking to one of our keynote presenters during this conference, and he said something that really resonated with myself and my team, is that if kids, regardless how young they are, if they can understand and experience racism, if they can understand and experience poverty, that we should use it as an opportunity also to be able to teach them about some of these so-called sensitive topics. But without further ado, all right, I want to bring forth a real dope educator. And one of the things that we always try to do is making sure that we reach out and identify some of the teachers that are doing some real good things in the classroom here in Palm Beach County. We can bring in experts and pay all the big money to all the so-called scholars and so forth to come and have these conversations. But we have our own experts, we have our own scholars right here in our backyard. And this is definitely one of them. And she teaches out, and if anybody outside of, or that is joining us outside of the school district of Palm Beach County, we're the 10th largest school district in the country. And that is not only by population, all right? But one of the things is that we're a huge county geographically. And she teaches at one of the far more remote regions of our district, which is the Glades, which is an incredible part. And you got some incredible people. It's a dope community. And also they have a real rich history. Actually, I spent 2 years of my career teaching in that particular region of our school district. So she's coming in from Belle Glade Elementary School. Without further ado, I want to bring forth Wilosa Pettway.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Wilosa. So I know you got some stuff that you're going to kind of bring to the table today for some of our participants to help them develop an understanding of how do we infuse within elementary instruction. I know a couple of years ago, I've been trying to get you to come on this platform. I tried to get you to join us last year. You was hesitated, but this year, you didn't have a choice. I didn't give you a choice to do it. I know I kind of forced you to do it this year, but I told you this is going to be a benefit not only just for our children here in Palm Beach County, but this may go out on an international level. We're definitely going to be a national level and a statewide impact as far as just to show example of the phenomenal work that you're doing with these students and how you engage in students and instruction and helping students develop skills that they already have by simply using curriculum and instructional materials where those students can see themselves. One of the things that we keep pushing forward throughout this entire conference is that we need to kind of shift away from the viewpoint as educators. Our job is to empower children. Our job is not to empower children, but our job is to help children tap into their natural God-given power. It's a power that they're born with already. We need to create the environments that cultivate that power. So I just want you to walk us through how this is done, some of the things that you've done, and even show us some student samples of how you've infused African American content within writing and literacy within your classroom.
Okay, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for all the push, because he definitely pushed me to do this. And I think it was difficult for me to realize how significant it was what I was doing in the classroom, because to me it just looked so normal as an African American student myself. When I received my minor from Florida State in African American Studies, it just really gave me the passion, and I wanted to share that with my students here in the classroom. So I figured out a way to infuse African American history into elementary instruction. And one of the ways I do it is through my passion for writing. I teach reading and writing out here at Dudley Elementary. This year I'm in fourth grade, but I went to fourth and I'm on the fifth. And it's every year I want to make sure I am sharing their history with the students. And I like to share things that I learned on a collegiate level. I didn't get this when I was in the Glades, because I'm from the Glades myself. So I didn't get this as an instruction from Palm Beach County schools. When I did receive it, I just fell in love with African American culture and history, and it just made me be more empowered to be African American. So I'm just really excited to share it with my own students. So one of the things that we'll look at today is the biggest debate in African American history, which is Booker T. Washington versus W.E.B. Du Bois. And I know you're probably thinking, like, how can you introduce that to kids that are just, so young? But I figured out a way. So I'm going to share my screen. Is that okay with you right now? All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So here is how it works in this year, writing Google Classroom. So the first thing, let me move this. So the very first thing we do is going into the writing. And I tell my students before, oops, and I did it again. I keep doing that. So let me try it one more time. Hold on, give me a second. I keep doing the same thing over and over. So here's the writing prompt. And the first thing I tell my students is before we do anything, it's writing. So let's go figure out what it is they want us to answer. It's always a big question. What is that big question? And as you guys can see, we have notes because this is our actual instruction. This is what we actually did in the classroom. So the very first thing they know we do is we go to the prompt. So we have to go through all of this. I gave them 3 sources because I want them to understand content before they get to writing. And they love writing. So here is our prompt. And they know the first thing we need to do is read the prompt in its entirety and let's figure out keywords. So we've already done that. We did this a couple months ago. So we know that it's an opinion writing, and then we have to answer the big question of the week. Well, for this particular topic, it was 2 weeks. So the question is, who had the better plan, Booker T. Washington or W.E.B. Du Bois? That's the question they had to answer. So they know right off the bat, this is an opinion essay, and they know they need to pick a choice. They need to pick Booker T. Washington or W.E.B. Du Bois. So I tell them we need to create a 2-column chart. So we do that at the end of every text. This way the kids are focused and they know what they're looking for. So at the bottom, as you can see, we have Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So when they're reading the text, and I can't give this to them and just say, here, go and read it. Because the text is so rich in culture, it's so rich in life experiences and in history that I have to read this stuff with them. So the first one is about Booker T. Washington. Of course, we're going to learn more about his plan. We go through, I read with them, their read will stop. We have to understand some things. I have to, give them backstory on things they wouldn't have known about. And then we break through, we're looking for specifics. We're looking for specifically what was his plan. So when we finish the text, We found his talking points for his plan, and we didn't find anything for W.E.B. Du Bois because he wasn't in this text. So we have point one, he told blacks to be patient, and he said that blacks should work hard and they gain respect from white people. The text, the words that we're using, these are the exact words that Booker T. Washington used. We know we don't call ourselves blacks and white people. We don't use those terms today, but that's the terms that they were using then. And that's a teaching point for the students to understand that African Americans have gone through many different titles. And this is why I don't just give it to them and say, hey, go do what you do. This is something that I have to read with them daily. And it takes us about a week to get through this text. So the second text, we have W.E.B. Du Bois. We're going to learn more about his plan. And they see, as we read, I'm reading with them. They're telling me what to highlight. We're chunking the text. So we're doing all those reading strategies, but we're also learning African American history and preparing for writing. So they're gaining so many different skills that they're not even aware of. So as we keep reading, we finish reading and reading. We go down, and then you see here our notes on W.E.B. Du Bois. We're picking up things from his plans. We take those notes, we put them right in. And we had to do everything in Canvas. Usually we do things on hand, and they would be writing this on hand. But it kind of worked out because now I can share with you guys what we actually did. This is authentic instruction that we've done in the class already. So we have our notes from Mr. W.E.B. Du Bois in this particular article. Now, this article was very, very interesting because it was actually written by W.E.B. Du Bois himself, and it was his criticism of Booker T. Washington. And a lot of adults don't know about this particular debate. I mean, if I discuss it with some of my coworkers, they're like, what? I didn't know about that. And I actually shared this with the entire team. But it's something that you got to really be passionate about. So as you can see in the beginning, we get the editor's note. That's, I had to explain to my students, what is the editor's note? They know that this is someone presently writing. But then I tell them, okay, here we are. We're coming right to Du Bois' words. So that's why we have Du Bois' words here. So they know that this is authentic literature from him. These are his words. This is his text. So we're going through, and as we're reading, they know the big deal. The big question is, what's his plan? So we can take those notes. And in here, we might even find some of Booker T. Washington's plan, because this is W.E.B. Du Bois pretty much criticizing Booker T. Washington's plan. So after we go through, same thing, we still got our 2 column notes, and here it is. We got more we learned about Booker T. Washington's plan. They learned about the Atlanta Compromise. They did not know about that before. They would have probably never heard about that in elementary school, but I found a way to make sure they understood where we were coming from and our history, why we should value the education that we have now, because they understood. And I loved reading this, because once they read his, this is at the point where the kids are reading it and I'm listening, and I had students reading and they were like, wait, what? They wanted us to just do this, and immediately they made up their mind who they wanted to choose to write about just by learning more about his plan. And the good thing about this, I have 2 extreme different classes. One of the classes, I have students that are on grade level. They are ready. They can read these texts independently, but they still need the help with the life lessons and the history behind the text. And then I have a group of kids that they need a little bit more help. They need a little bit, they're my L25 kids. They need a little bit more help, not quite on grade level. However, with my help and my assistance on reading these, they're able to understand the content. They're able to understand the history. So even if they cannot read it on their own, as we read it and chunk it and do these reading strategies together, not only are they gaining those reading skills, but they're understanding what happened between the W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington's debate without even being able to read the content on their level. So we also got more about Du Bois' plan. And then we get to more, we've read all those texts. It takes us a week to get through this because we only have 30 minutes for writing. So it takes us a week to get through all of the text. They know, what do we do now? We need to plan. So my students, this is their planning. I just wrote what they told me to write. I was just there to record what it is they told me to write. They said they wanted the introduction. They choose W.E.B. Du Bois have the better plan. And then they wrote their 3 reasons. They said because he said Blacks should demand rights. They should have full education for Black youth to become leaders. And they said Blacks and whites should work together to create a better life for African Americans. So they did all of the work. I just recorded. I'm like, okay, that's what you guys want to go with. But it was easy for us to find it because we took all these notes. They basically just went through and they had now that was for my second class, but my first class, they're a little bit more independent, a little bit more mature writers. They planned on their own because they don't need as much guidance. So after we did that, they did their writing. So what I did was I created at the end of the 2 weeks a sample. I do have some student samples that I want to share of how their writing went. And let me see how to make this bigger. Can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it pretty. I can see it real good now.
It's a real good one. She went through, she knows the 5, she got her 5 paragraphs. And this is one where she wrote on her own. So if I just go through, because I'm reading essays all day, I can show you all of her, where is it? Here it is. All of her reasons. So, we can tell right off the bat, here's her opinion. Where is it? So she got her hook, or I'm looking for her opinion here. She never gave me her opinion, but it looks like she's saying W.E.B. Du Bois. Yeah, she's sitting right here. So it took her a little longer to tell us her opinion, but right here she tells us W.E.B. Du Bois had a better plan, and then she gives us her first reason because she said we should, because Blacks should demand equal rights. So that's her first one. That wasn't a good one. And then she goes on to tell us more. Secondly, because he said that Blacks should have full education. And we stressed these points of what full education meant. And they were really, contrasting it to Booker T. Washington's plan at the time. And here's her third reason. She said because they should become friends and help one another out. So she wrote all of her, this is her opinion. This is what the students' text, their samples look like from the 2 weeks. It took us 2 weeks, 1 week to read everything. And then the second week, they work on a paragraph every day. Here's another student sample. Let's make this one a little bit bigger. So hers was, here's her opinion, right smack dab in the middle. She says, in my opinion, I believe W.E.B. Du Bois had the better plan on getting African Americans equal rights. These are student samples. This comes right from the students. And then she goes on, we can find her first reason. And she says he had a better plan because he said they should demand equal rights. It was like, she wants to change hers after I went on my second class. And then W.E.B. Du Bois had the better plan because he says we should have the right to vote. So hers weren't as, it wasn't just like mine. And then she said W.E.B. Du Bois had the better plans because he said Blacks should have full education. And I think that she goes on to elaborate. She says here is important to me. So they're making this personal. She says this is important to me. So I also created a sample for the students because even though we went through all of that, it's still difficult for some of my students to know how to put that on paper. So I gave them my own sample. It's a little wordy because I'm passionate about this topic. So, and I told my student that once we finished and I shared my essay with them, they're like, Ms. Pettway, you expect us to write like that? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I got a I got a little excited because I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about this subject. This is something that's near and dear to me. So they understood, like, oh, okay, it's Pettway like that, and they get excited to know what you're excited about. So they enjoyed this lesson. They really, really enjoyed this lesson. So that's what we did as far as the writing part. And what I was able to do, I found a poem that I did not know existed. And in my classroom, every week we have a different poem that we worked on. I know poetry is difficult for the students, so every year I start the year out with poetry. Just every week they have a different poem, and we're dissecting that poem and dissecting that poem. So I actually found a poem that I did not know existed, and I got so excited like a kid. I found a poem about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So I created an assignment. It worked well. So it helped my students get a brief summary of this whole W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington debate, and they loved it. So the first day we did a prediction. I just tell them the title of the poem, and they just have to tell me what they predict the poem will be about. And I was super excited when I found the poem because it pretty much was kind of like a conversation. I've never heard the poem, and I was so excited. But it's basically a conversation between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, and it just further hones in on what it is they stood for at that time. And it really gave the kids, it's almost like the kids can visualize this debate. And it was almost like we went back in time at that time, because the kids were like, I really would be with W.E.B. Du Bois. And I had some kids that, they really thought Booker T. Washington's plan was pretty decent. So it was really a experience for them. So then they have to tell me what the poem was about. The vocabulary. And we read it again. Well, the first day I read the poem and they just listen to me. The next day, now I read and they echo read me. This is building their fluency. So they're learning about the history, but they're still doing those reading skills that they need every day. This day we do vocabulary. So I found a couple of words that I thought maybe they don't know what these words mean. And we looked at them. And I want to say we had to use our context clues. So it's standard based. We're using standard RL 2.4, where we're determining the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in the text. So I'll write the word, then they have to figure out what context clue can help them figure out the meaning of that word. So if we look at rejoice, some men rejoice in skill in hand, and some in cultivating land. And they're like, okay, what words can we find that help us to figure out the meaning of rejoice? We will write those context clues and then those possible meanings. Day 3, we do some inferential questions. This is the day they read and I listen. No, this is the day, no, Tuesday, the second day is the day that we read all. No, I read, today is the day we read all together. So we read it first, I read it. Second day, they echo read me, and then we chorale read on the third day together. So it's building their fluency. Words that they weren't familiar with on the first day, this day they're more familiar with these words. They feel more confident because this is their third time reading it. So this day we ask specific questions. These still standard days, we're asking questions about making inferences. We're determining the theme. We're looking in depth at the characters. So these are standards that the kids are working on all year. But this is more, it's building their more understanding of their writing assignment. Also, they're still learning the culture because they can use this also as background knowledge when they're writing for that week's writing. So more just standard-based text on grade level, and they're answering these questions on this day. Day 4, this is the day they're reading to me. I'm not doing any of the reading. They're reading this stuff to me. And I think what we did this day, when we looked further at some phrases. So we're going back to determining words and phrases, because we need to understand what these phrases mean. We don't talk like this anymore. What does it mean that Mr. Charlie needs a hand? So we're reading more. We go back and they figure out what do these words mean based off the text. That last day we do an extended activity. This is the day I pick a couple students to read a verse. And this one was very interesting because we had the girls kind of speak as Booker T and then the boys speak as W.E.B. Du Bois, and it was great. They loved it. So we just made it fun by the end of the day. It's Friday, we make it fun. And on this day, we got to ask ourselves, who's the speaker? And what's the speaker's point of view on Booker T. Washington? What's some evidence? This is RL 2.6, where we're comparing and contrasting the point of view of different texts. So it's all standard based, and it's rich text, and it's on grade level, and it's infusing that lessons, and the kids love it. They absolutely love these lessons. And I make it fun because I'm so animated. And it's easy for me to be animated about it because I love this stuff. I'm passionate about it. So it's easy for me to deliver it to them because it's my own passion. So that's pretty much what I had to share. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And back with you.
Thank you, Ms. Pettway. I sat there now. I'm learning from you as how to do this. You know, my expertise is not elementary education, as far as when it comes to the pedagogy and the instruction of it. So I was sitting here taking notes and so forth for some things that I can help and support teachers with when we go out to different schools and so forth throughout our district. So thank you for that amazing presentation and just an example and samples of just work that teachers can easily do in their classroom. And one thing that you mentioned that is a real simple process is that when we're using these materials, and sometimes when we use the word infusion or transformation in the classroom, it seems like this kind of insurmountable obstacle to some people through perception. But you're still pretty much teaching those standard-based instruction. You're still using the same skills and so forth. You're still staying within your focus calendar and everything, but yet you're just substituting materials where students can see themselves and shifting away from the mainstream materials and the traditional curriculum, which is more found in elementary, right? Because we've had presentations, even when it comes to children's books, is that you have an extremely low representation of Black children in books, right? You have books that have representation of animals more than Black and brown children, right? And that's just fact, and that's just where we are, unfortunately, right? So you're just simply bringing in those materials where kids can see themselves, and it's a story that they can relate to, and it's an experience that they have experienced and they can understand it. And that's one of the key things that I was listening to as you were speaking, is that, you know, it was certain concepts without reading the article and so forth that the kids were already understanding, right? So that whole concept is like, you know, this is too sensitive and we can't talk about racism or even some of those ugly spots that happened throughout our history, right? This is not critical race theory stuff, technically, right? This is stuff that actually happened. This is just American history, right? And it's impossible to tell American history with any kind of academic integrity without bringing in these topics, right? So that's what I'm going to segue into the first question I'm going to ask you, just doing a real brief discussion here. So, you know, I'm listening to you talking about the Atlanta Compromise by Booker T. Washington, right? Which is one of his very controversial speeches in history, right? And when it comes to whose viewpoint that you kind of agree with, you know, there's you know, almost kind of a polarization within the community, within the Black community, as far as who they roll with and who they agree with and disagree. Me personally, both of them had great points. All right, you know, Booker T. Washington, work hard, self-reliance, and so forth, which is the same ideology that Marcus Garvey, and I know you said you've done even some lesson plans with Marcus Garvey in your classroom, and the Nation of Islam and Brother Malcolm and so forth advocated that self-reliance piece. Then representation, being able to write, to vote, enfranchisement, and those kind of pieces, which were, you know, expressed by other leaders such as Dr. King, et cetera, right? But at the same time, it all was talking about Black upliftment and elevation at the same time. So when we talk about the Atlanta Compromise, back to that, you know, 1895, right? This is when the Atlanta Compromise was delivered by Booker T. Washington. We see 1896, which is the next year, with Plessy versus Ferguson case, which is probably the most one of the most catastrophic events post Reconstruction for Black people, right? So, and which entered and ushered in what we know as the Jim Crow era. So within the Jim Crow era, you can't not talk about racism. So when you approach these children and having those conversations about racism in this country, how do you take that approach and what is usually the response from students?
At this age, and because of my own passion, I be sure to just give the facts. I stick to the facts. I try not to be subjective about things um, because I know it's sensitive. So what I do, I just give them the facts and tell them this is what it was. One of the other things that we did was because this was an opinion piece, but you could easily make this an informative essay by having the students do something like write an informative essay to describe some of the plans that civil rights activists had at this time. And I've done that. That's the time where I added Marcus Garvey, I had W.E.B. Du Bois, and I had Booker T. Washington. So it's not like, let's pick whose plan is better. Just give the facts. What were their plans? How did they think we should move forward as African Americans at that time? So if you're afraid of kind of like making it a little bit more, having some sensitivity in the classroom, you can always make it informative, by just stating those facts instead of having the kids pick. But this was an opinion piece, and for me, sometimes it is kind of hard to be subjective about it because I am African American, I am passionate about it, but I just stick to the facts. And sometimes I have kids who will say, "Well, that's not fair," and I just simply say, "You know what? That was history. That's a part of American history that we had to go through." So just keep it simple and just stick to the facts.
Love it. Absolutely. Just maintain just being objective. And you can't remove, and I know it's difficult sometimes being completely objective when teaching one of these kind of lessons, right? Being an African American and just being so near and dear to the experience or close to the experience. I'm going to say dear because it wasn't a positive experience, but being close to that experience. So it's kind of hard, but just like you say, stick to the facts. This is what happened. This is what we got the receipts for, right? In addition to trying your best and hardest to keep your personal opinions and out of and because our job is not that we're not here indoctrinating on children, right? And which is unfortunately what education does. It indoctrinates already when people are saying that, oh, we shouldn't indoctrinate, but it does indoctrinate, and you indoctrinate children by keeping that history away from them, right? You're already indoctrinating them, you're already conditioning them and showing that they don't belong within the whole time frame of human history. And as Black children, when I'm not even shown in a timeline of human history, it even removes and questions my own humanity, which translates in a whole lot of despondent outcomes for Black children. So excellent job on that one. So my next question, which is the last question, right? So here's the most pragmatic approach to it. Where do you find these resources, and where do you think are the best resources for teachers to use in making sure that we have, resources that are accurate and resources that have integrity? Because that's one of the challenges that some teachers are going to say. It's like, okay, where do I find these things? I know our team supports teachers and we provide some resources for teachers to find articles and so forth, but our educators are amazing. So sometimes you can go independent outside of us and being able to identify resources. And I know that you have some incredible stuff. So where would you point a teacher who is, okay, now I want to do this, but where do I find the materials?
Well, I know the district already have approved for us to use News ELA, so that's where I get a lot of my facts. Like I love News ELA, and I love the fact that I can, I've gone from different grades, so I can use the same prompt, but I can just change it for the next grade level. So I go to News ELA a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. Like the entire month of February, we're writing about African American history or topics dealing with African American history and culture. So I always go to News ELA. Another area that I like to go to also is Common Lit. Common Lit has a couple of poems, and it wasn't appropriate for this grade level, but next year when I'm moving up to fifth grade with my students next year, I definitely have material ready for that time from Common Lit, and it's one of my favorite poems that like I told you, we love poems now. We didn't used to like poems, but we love poems now. And I found this poem where the girl is basically talking about getting her hair braided and how she's sitting there, she feels like her leg is gonna, and I found that in Common Lit. I just look around, I try to use the sources that are already pre-approved by the district. I try not to go out of those areas. I just look around because it's so many different rooms. You go to News ELA, you can find almost anything about everything. And I just search. That's what I do for planning. That's what I do during the summers. I sit there and I plan what I want to do with my students in the fall for the entire month of February. Everything is like Black history, Black authors, um, poets. All of our poems that month is either based on African American history or is written by African American poet. And one thing that I noticed when I first started doing this is that African American poets, their stuff is hard. It's difficult to teach this to elementary school kids. So it's not one of those things that you can just give it to them and they're gonna get it. You have to really walk them through it step by step because it's some difficult content. It's really difficult. So you really have to walk it through it with them because the vernacular is so rich. You have to explain when they're saying what you're gonna get. You have to. The kids are like, what? You have to explain that stuff. So that's where I usually go. I like Common Lit and I love News ELA. I cannot tell you where I found that poem, but I was so giddy when I found it that I can't even remember where I found that poem at. Because sometimes I'll just search. I'll search for stuff. Um, but those are the main two that I like to use.
Thank you. And you may have some teachers reaching out to you that's going to watch the session throughout the year and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to be kind of utilized for support. And eventually it's going to be that day, Wilosa, that you're going to end up joining our team and be part of the office of the long title that we got. And we welcome you here. So thank you, Wilosa, for all that you do, the commitment and dedication to making sure that you provide a quality education for our children, that they can see themselves. They can understand the world through their lens and of seeing things. And, I can go back to, being in fourth grade, I didn't have any exposure. I knew who Debbie E.B. Du Bois or Booker T. Washington was or Marcus Garvey. That's stuff that I learned in my later years. I'm going through middle school and high school. And even in middle school and high school, it wasn't through the educational system that I got exposed to that. There was still stuff outside materials and books that I got my hands on. And eventually started exposing me to these people and so forth, where forever changed and shaped the trajectory of my life. And us as educators, we have that responsibility not to withhold information from our students, but expose our students to information, especially information that's pertinent to their lives and their experiences. So thank you, Wilosa. Thank you for everything that you're doing and continue to just keep up the amazing work until you join us over here at the Office of African American, blah, blah, blah. All right, so thank you. Appreciate it, sister.
I truly appreciate you pushing me. I needed that push. Like I said, it's for me. It just seems so normal. So I didn't realize what it is that you saw that I was doing in the classroom. I didn't realize it. I'm just thinking, I'm just giving them instructions. I didn't realize it. So thank you for seeing it and pushing me. I really appreciate that.
And I'm going to say this in closing, right? And one of the things you said that was strong is that you thought it was just normal. Now, the inverse of that, or the opposite of that, is that you have educators that need more capacity building. I don't ever want to call an educator a bad educator, even though you have a few out there, right? But most of the educators that we have here in our district are great, but we all can strive to be greater, whatever our respective role is. Even in my role, I'm always learning, always revising, always trying to grow, right? But you have some that think normal is teaching a curriculum that is shrouded and indoctrinated with white supremacy. right? And that are just like, this is normal. This is what we do. And if we've come across that, and you can't really necessarily fault everybody based off their own ignorance. And I say ignorance in a way of not being informed about that history. So, you say it's normal, but some people may not see that. And some people may need to create a new normal with the support from your normal, Wilosa. So once again, thank you. So we're going to close out. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for finally not accepting my invite, but my force of coming in and joining us for the 27th annual African American and Caribbean Studies Summer Institute, where we're taking this marathon of transforming education by affirming and centering Black history and culture. Peace and love.